Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
What happened today, all I had to do was sign an IRS form. That's probably the happiest I've ever been signing an IRS document.
That was Governor Brian Kemp on Tuesday when he announced that Georgia is opting into a federal education tax credit program enacted under President Donald Trump's very controversial One Big Beautiful Bill. And that is one of the headlines we're following today, Wednesday, January 21st, 2026, and this midweek edition of On the Record with Atlanta News First. I'm Tim Darnell. The Georgia General Assembly is in full swing, and we have a number of reports from our outstanding crew of political and general assignment reporters here at Atlanta News First. First of all, we're going to hear from our political reporter, Doug Reardon, on the announcement, as I said, on yesterday, Tuesday, January 20th, in which Brian Kemp announced that Georgia will be opting in to a program that is being heralded by school choice advocates nationwide that will allow Georgia taxpayers individually a tax credit of up to $1,700 if they participate in this federal education tax incentive program.
What happened today, all I had to do was sign an IRS form. That's probably the happiest I've ever been signing an IRS document.
Governor Brian Kemp announcing he's opting Georgia into a new tax credit baked into the big beautiful bill passed by Congress this summer. It's a dollar-for-dollar match up to $1,700. People can make what are essentially donations and write the money off later. In essence, it's a privately funded voucher program.
And just as we trust Georgians know best how to spend their tax dollars, we also trust families to make the best decisions for their child's education.
The donations will be available to families making 300% below their area's median income. Decisions on who gets them will be made by Georgia's existing scholarship organization. Georgia already has a similar state program and the Promise Scholarship, which is state-funded and provides families in low-tier school districts $6,500 for private or homeschooling.
Anything that takes money out of our public schools or anything that's not adding more money into our public schools fundamentally is not helpful.
Democratic State Senator Kim Jackson says the state needs to focus less on shuffling students out of public schools and more on investing in them.
Parents of children who are really suffering, who are in significantly low-income areas, they do not have expendable income to be able to send their kids to private school. So we need to take those dollars and invest them into the public schools where those kids are zoned for.
That was Doug Reardon at the state capitol yesterday, January 20th. Again, this is On the Record, your midweek political report here on Atlanta News First. I'm Tim Darnell. And as I mentioned at the top of the stream, the Georgia legislature is now in full swing. Our assignment reporter, Abby Kasuris, has this report on some of the bills that Georgia lawmakers are proposing with a special emphasis on education in our public school system.
For Carmen Beltran, the debate over cell phones isn't theoretical. It's happening in her 9th grader's classroom, and even he admits phones can get in the way of learning.
If you want to pay attention in class, yeah, you shouldn't have your phone.
After banning phones for younger students, State Representative Scott Hilton now wants to expand that policy into Georgia's high schools.
We're hearing it's just a distraction to learning, which is why we send our kids to school. Not only learning, though, it's mental health, it's public safety.
Samantha Halliburton's daughter, Omni, is years away from high school, but one proposal already has her attention. A bill that would require firearm safety education in Georgia classrooms starting in kindergarten, teaching children what to do if they encounter a gun. Halliburton says she wants to be a part of that conversation.
Overall, yes, if parents could opt out for it, that would be amazing.
According to the Center for Disease Control, firearms are the leading cause of death for children and teens ages 1 to 17 in Georgia. The bill's sponsor, State Senator Rick Williams, has worked in the funeral home business for 53 years. He says one of the hardest parts is meeting families who've lost a child in an accidental shooting.
As you see a gun, you do not touch it. You go get a an adult.
Another bill parents are watching would require vape detectors in Georgia high schools. A University of Georgia survey found 1 in 5 high school students has used a vaping product.
The kids are vaping in school. They're going to the bathrooms. It's becoming an epidemic.
The detector sends aerosol particles tied to nicotine or THC and alerts staff in real time. Funding could come from grants or the state's budget.
I think the detectors are a great idea.
At the state capitol, I'm Abby Kasouris.
That was Abby Kasouris talking about the various programs and bills and efforts and initiatives and priorities that some Georgia lawmakers are endorsing in this most recent session of the Georgia General Assembly. Obviously, this is the second year of the 2-year General Assembly session. We're in the middle of an election year, which means that there are a lot of political and election issues that are floating around the state capitol that lawmakers are pushing. We have a number of state lawmakers and constitutionally elected officials, such as Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who are running for governor and higher office this year, and this is obviously making this legislative session possibly a little bit more politically charged than we have seen in the past. Last week, Governor Brian Kemp delivered his final State of the State address, in which this is the 8th and final State of the State address that the outgoing Georgia governor will make. He was first elected in 2018, handily reelected in 2022, and the governor made a lot of headlines last week when he announced yet another $1 billion tax credit or tax cut, lowering the state's income tax rate down to 4.99%. Here's a report on the governor's State of the State address. Again, we hear from political reporter Doug Reardon.
Because as I've said before, that's your money, not the government's.
Governor Brian Kemp in his last State of the State address announced another year of tax relief. Using the massive state surplus, his return of money to taxpayers will net individual filers $250 and married couples an average of $500.
And at the end of the day, if we have more than we need, we give it back to the people who actually earned it.
Democrats say it's money, but it's not enough for most families.
That will not take care of the needs that most families are thinking about. They're thinking about child care. They're thinking about paying rent. But a one-time $250 and a one-time $500, what is that really going to do?
Democrats also said the governor glossed over health care with no mention of expiring federal tax credits or Medicaid expansion they've been seeking for years. In addition to the tax rebate, Kemp also put forth an acceleration of Georgia's income tax reduction to below 5% 3 years ahead of schedule. $2,000 payments for state employees like teachers and law enforcement. $325 million for a needs-based college scholarship, and a bump for police officers' 401ks. Kemp, whose term limited this year, said he's no lame duck and reminded the legislature he's still the governor through this legislative session.
Don't be fooled. There's more work to be done over the next 37 legislative days. And for those of you who may think I'm a lame duck, just remember I have a big red pen.
Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.
As I mentioned earlier, this is an election year, and Democrats are hopeful to, again, perhaps have a much more favorable electoral climate in 2026 than they have over the past several electoral cycles. Their hopes have been buoyed by a couple of special elections last year in 2025, and on the very highly influential Georgia Public Service Commission. This is a 5-member elected public body that is in charge of regulating and approving any electrical rate hikes or anything that has to do with utilities in the state of Georgia. Until last November, all 5 members of the Public Service Commission were Republicans. However, in a special election this past November, 2 Republicans were unseated by 2 Democrats. And partly one of the issues that was really prevalent in that campaign, and that is prevalent moving forward, are the issue of data centers. These are massive complexes that use a tremendous amount of electricity. They've come under a lot of heavy scrutiny lately because of the tremendous power consumption, I should say, that these data centers employ. Abby Kasuris has this report on how legislators are, again, right now, looking at perhaps putting a moratorium or referendum or some kind of limit on the number of data centers that can be approved in the future here in Georgia.
A large-scale data center.
From metro Atlanta to rural Georgia, data center proposals are spreading, and so is the pushback. Supporters say these massive facilities are already reshaping Georgia's economy. A report from the Carl Vinson Institute of Government shows data centers created more than 28,000 construction jobs and 5,000 permanent jobs, pumping billions of dollars into the state.
Honestly, one of the cleanest, greenest, quietest data center regulations in the country.
Georgia's growth is different and faster than anywhere else. According to the investment firm CBRE, Metro Atlanta led the nation in data center expansion last year, surpassing Northern Virginia. And state utility regulators have approved plans to add roughly 10,000 megawatts of new power, largely to meet future data center demand.
But before we start,
Democrat State Representative Rua Roman says the pace is exactly the problem. She's dropping a bill that would pause new data centers through 2027. She says she recruited Republican co-sponsors.
This is permanent. This is a permanent change, and if we get it wrong, Georgians will have to deal with the consequences for decades to come.
The bill would likely need to make it through Republican Representative Brad Thomas's committee, and he feels a statewide moratorium goes too far. It could choke Georgia's economic growth. He points to communities like Covington, where data center revenue could eventually replace property taxes.
I think local communities should make that decision of what works.
Abby Kasuris, Atlanta News First.
Georgia's nationally watched 2026 midterm elections will be a constant focus from now through the end of November and possibly into December if we have any runoffs. And Atlanta News First will continue to follow all of the late-breaking and current political developments. We encourage you to watch and listen to On the Record with Atlanta News First every Sunday morning on Atlanta News First at 11 a.m. You can also download and listen to all of the On the Record with Atlanta News First podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Thank you for watching ANF Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and your community stories, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch us on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. To join the conversation on YouTube Live, visit our channel and hit subscribe. You can also listen to the Atlanta News First podcast by searching Atlanta News First on your preferred listening platform.